Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Melody, and on this channel I want to help you to grow in your faith. Today we are responding to a Jewish TikTok that I found about what the Jews believe about Jesus. So without further ado, we're just gonna jump into it.
Do Jews believe in Jesus? Hi, my name's Miriam. I'm an Orthodox Jew and I share what my life is like. Whenever I discuss this topic, I feel like I need to put a video warning. I am discussing Jewish beliefs. I am not telling anybody that their beliefs are wrong or that they should believe as I believe.
To be honest, I find this statement rather lame. If you're going to go out there and you're going to share your faith, you should be able to stand 100% on that. To tell people that, oh, whatever, like your belief, it's not wrong. I'm not telling you it's wrong. Like, this is what I believe. And like, it's so lame, it's so like lukewarm, and it can be dangerous because we want people to know the truth. We want people to get saved. And by making statements like this, it makes you question like how firm her belief actually is. Now, of course, there is a difference between like being a Christian and believing in Christianity and believing in Jesus and like other religions. But once again, it's like, if you're gonna stand on something, you should stand on it wholeheartedly and not just be this lukewarm person in your faith, in your belief.
Jews recognize Jesus as a Jewish man. He was born of a Jewish mother. We do not recognize him as a prophet. We do not recognize him as a son of God, and we do not recognize him as a Messiah. Jesus does not play a part in our religious belief, and if somebody tells you he does, they're no longer practicing Judaism. I say this to make the distinction because some people have heard of Jews for Jesus. That is not Judaism, that's Christianity disguised as Judaism to try and get Jews to convert.
That's so interesting, and it's such an interesting way to put it, since there are people from a Jewish background, they're like born Jews, but then they do become Christians. The first Christians, if we look in the Bible, they were born and raised Jews. And so that's a whole nother topic, and I don't feel like I'm the right person to talk about that, but it's still just so fascinating. Now, what we are going to talk about today is Jesus as a prophet, Jesus as the Son of God, and Jesus as the Messiah. Now, of course, I'm coming from a Christian point of view, but I feel this is something we really need to lift up and just acknowledge over and over again. So if we start off with Jesus as a prophet, we can see that Jesus is, number one, he's a fulfillment of prophecies in the Old Testament, which we're going to look a little bit deeper into in a moment. We also see in the New Testament that Jesus prophesied his own death and resurrection, for example, and it came to pass. He also speaks about future events and the end times and how people will be in that time, like what will happen. And we can already see many of these things come to pass as well. So when it comes to Jesus talking about his own death and resurrection, what was yet to come, we're going to read from a couple places in the Bible, starting off with Matthew 16 and verse 21. From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. But on the third day he would be raised from the dead. And then Matthew 17 and verse 22 to 23. After they gathered again in Galilee, Jesus told them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of his enemies. He will be killed, but on the third day he will be risen from the dead." And the disciples were filled with grief. Matthew 20 and verse 18 to 19 says, "Listen," he said, "we're going up to Jerusalem, where the Son of Man will be betrayed by the leading priests and the teachers of religious law. They will sentence him to die. Then they will hand him over to the Romans to be mocked, flogged with a whip, and crucified. But on the third day he will be risen from the dead." Mark 8:31. Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would be risen from the dead. And so these were just a few examples of places in the Bible where it clearly states that Jesus himself is talking about future events, his death and resurrection. So now we're going to look a little bit about Jesus as the fulfillment of prophecies in the Old Testament, which I found was very interesting. So I found this PDF file on the internet that has put together 351 Old Testament prophecies fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Now, we don't have time to go through each and every one of these today. I'm going to pick a few that we're going to look at, but I'm going to link the whole PDF file down below in the description if you want to check it out more in depth. Starting off in Genesis 22, it's about Abraham's faith being tested, and when God told him to sacrifice his only son Isaac on the altar. But then he provided a lamb in the last second to replace Isaac. And this is a foreshadowing of Christ to come. And so we can read from verse 7. Isaac turned to Abraham and said, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "We have the fire and the wood," the boy said, "but where is the sheep for the burnt offering?" "God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son," Abraham answered, and they both walked on together. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Yes," Abraham replied, "here I am." "Don't lay a hand on the boy," the angel said. "Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son." Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. In a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. And this is such a beautiful story about how God provides. And he provided Jesus as a sacrifice in our place, just like he provided the ram for Abraham in Isaac's place. This is such an amazing story and a foreshadowing of Christ to come. And so if we read from John 1 and verse 29, the next day John saw Jesus coming towards him and said, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Then we can go to Genesis 49 and verse 10, where it says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from his descendants, until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, the one whom all the nations will honor," talking about the coming Messiah. So then we can read from John 11, verse 47 to 52, and there we read, "Then the leading priests and the Pharisees called the high council together. 'What are we going to do?' they asked each other. 'This man certainly performs many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. Then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation.' Caiaphas, who was high priest at the time, said, 'You don't know what you are talking about. You don't realize that it's better for you that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed.' He did not say this on his own. As a high priest at the time, he was led to prophesy that Jesus would die for the entire nation. And not only for that nation, but to bring together and unite all the children of God scattered around the world." And then we can read from Psalm 69, verse 14 to 20. "Rescue me from the mud. Don't let me sink any deeper. Save me from those who hate me and pull me from these deep waters. Don't let the floods overwhelm me, or the deep waters swallow me, or the pit of death devour me. Answer my prayer, O Lord, for your unfailing love is wonderful. Take care of me, for your mercy is so plentiful. Don't hide from your servant. Answer me quickly, for I am in deep trouble. Come and redeem me. Free me from my enemies. You know of my shame, scorn, and disgrace. You see all that my enemies are doing. Their insults have broken my heart, and I am in despair. If only one person would show some pity, if only one would turn and comfort me." And this is talking about the Messiah's anguish of soul before crucifixion, which is fulfilled. We can see that in Matthew 26 and verse 36 to 45. It's about when Jesus prays in Gethsemane. So we read, "Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, And he said, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little further and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, "Couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done." When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said, "Go ahead and sleep, have your rest, but look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners." So these were obviously just a small fraction of all the prophecies about Jesus in the Old Testament. I really encourage you to go and dig deep into this yourself, because it's truly fascinating to see how Jesus is the fulfillment of all of these prophecies about the Messiah to come. And so moving on, we're going to talk about Jesus as not only a Son of God, but the Son of God. Psalm 2 and verse 7 to 9. The King proclaims the Lord's decree. The Lord said to me, "You are my son. Today I have become your father. Only ask, and I will give you the nations as your inheritance, the whole earth as your possession. You will break them with an iron rod and smash them like clay pots." And then we have Isaiah 7 and verse 14. "All right then, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us." And if we read in Matthew chapter 1 and verse 22 to 23, we see the fulfillment of this. All of this occurred to fulfill the Lord's message through his prophet. "Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us." And then if we read in Hosea 11 and verse 1, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and I called my son out of Egypt." And we see the fulfillment of this in Matthew 2 and verse 15. "And they stayed there in Egypt until Herod's death. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet. I called my son out of Egypt." And so now, if we look at the last one, Jesus as the Messiah. Messiah means the anointed one. And so we can read in Isaiah 53 and verse 5. This is speaking, Isaiah 53, it's talking about the Messiah, the anointed one. "But he was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sins. He was beaten so we could be whole. He was whipped so we could be healed." And so I'm going to end this video with reading from 1 John 2 and verse 23, where it says, "Anyone who denies the Son does not have the Father either. But anyone who acknowledges the Son has the Father also." And this is why I like talking about these things and responding to these videos, is because if people deny Jesus, they are denying the Father. They might think that, oh, I worship God, there's one God, I worship him. But if they deny Jesus, they deny like God the Father also. They deny God, because Jesus is God in human form, and he came to save us by taking our punishment on himself on the cross. And I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!